Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Sian and I love making videos about true crime, horror, anything morbid or disturbing really. So if you're into that kind of content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you can see my videos more often. Today we're going to dive into a case that you've probably already heard of, the case of the Deadpool Killer. Since he got given 2 death sentences at the end of August, I thought it might be quite a nice relevant case to cover. Also, not just anyone gets given 2 death sentences for their crimes. What he did was really disgusting and really disturbing as well. Some of the things he said on trial and some of the things he said about the woman that he murdered really traumatized me slightly, so we're going to talk about it. We're going to do a deep dive into it. So just a little backstory on the Deadpool Killer. His real name is Wade Stephen Wilson, and in 2019 he brutally murdered 2 innocent women. 5 years later, he was eventually found guilty for the crimes that he committed in June of this year. And then in August, he got his 2 death sentences, like I explained before. Wade was a really troubled person with a long history of mental illness and substance abuse. He was also known to have quite the temper. He also received a lot of media attention and praise for his good looks, which I disagree with. You have most likely seen him either on TikTok or Instagram or some sort of social media. People have definitely gone a little bit crazy over him. It kind of reminds me of when Ted Bundy received all those letters while he was in prison from women just spooning over him and admiring him. The same thing has kind of happened with Wade. Lots of women are saying that he is just a mentally ill man who deserves a second chance. The fact of the matter is, he still brutally murdered 2 women. And if you're wondering why he is called the Deadpool Killer, it's because his name is Wade Wilson, and if you're not familiar with the Marvel movies, Deadpool's real name is also Wade Wilson. So that is the only link that they have. The media just kind of began to call him that, and it's kind of stuck. So let's go way back and take a look at Wade's childhood. He was born in May of 1994 as the adopted child of Stephen and Candace Wilson. He was raised in Florida, where he attended Childs High School, and when former classmates were interviewed asking them about Wade and what he was like in his childhood years, lots of them described him as quite a troubled child. One former classmate who was also interviewed, who wished to remain anonymous, described her experience with Wade during their school years. She recalled that when she sat around him and his friends around lunch, nobody would actually eat their lunch. They would just pass drugs around, which was really weird to her. She also mentioned that Wade was the very first person that she smoked marijuana with at the very young age of 14. They would smoke in the woods before school started, and this became a daily occurrence between her and Wade. In the interview, she also said that during these daily meetups that they would have to smoke marijuana, she never really felt unsafe with him, but she did say that he had very little respect for authority, saying that he was expelled from high school for smoking in the bathrooms and for setting a toilet roll on fire. What was very interesting was that every classmate who was asked about Wade's adoptive parents said that they were great people. They described Steve and Candace Wilson as very genuine, very friendly people who loved going to church and honestly only wanted the best for Wade. Lots of people were saying that he actually just had the world given to him. Apparently they all had a very nice house in the suburbs with some greyhounds and very nice expensive vehicles. But they were not just all about the material stuff, their minds were definitely in the right place too, and they really cared for Wade. So despite living in a very nice house and having everything provided for him, the classmates also all stated that they did feel something was off in Wade's life. He did sustain multiple head injuries quite early in his life. He later claimed that these injuries contributed to feelings of instability and turmoil in his life. Wade was still at quite a young age when his criminal history began in 2012. He started accumulating arrests in Leon County. These offenses included things such as burglary and child cruelty, to sexual assault and firearm violations. In November of 2013, he was actually sentenced to prison for burglary and grand theft, and he served time until the following year in September of 2014. In 2015, Wade faced even more serious charges of sexual battery and kidnapping after a woman accused him of raping her in her SUV. However, after the trial, the jury actually found him innocent, which raised questions of his past behavior. By 2017, Wade found himself behind bars again for stealing firearms, this time serving until July of 2018. And this still wasn't the end of his involvement in crime. Just before he murdered the 2 women that he now received a death sentence reasons for. His former girlfriend reported a really terrifying incident where she accused him of beating and strangling her. She says that Wade pushed her on the floorboard of her car, cut off all of her clothes with a knife, and told her to stay down there until he put her in the back of the car and then allegedly sexually assaulted her. She actually came out with a TikTok video sharing all of the details and telling her side of the story.
So I think it's time to do a real story time. If you're from Florida or near Florida, or you have a TV and news channel, you might have seen the Wade Wilson trial for a double murder. He was just found guilty, thank God, of killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz. So I dated this man in February of the same year that he killed those two women. So this is us. I went to the news after all of this had happened to tell them about what he did to me. Obviously, he had no facial tattoos then. This is us again. I dated this man for a few months. He lived with me, and on my birthday, February 2019, he actually kidnapped me, like tied me up, bound and gagged me, threw me in the back of my car, and drove me to the Keys, which is like 3.5 hours from where I lived in Florida. I went to the police. You might have to pause to read it, but I did go to the police. I went to the police right after. I drove back from the Keys at 4 a.m., going like 100 miles an hour, trying to get someone to help me. This is where he bit my face. He bit me, he busted my lip open. I had ligature marks on my hands and knees and my neck. I had fingerprints on my neck. I had a severely busted lip. This is my lip. So all of these photos were taken by me or the police officers on their cell phones. I do have over 200 photos that they took at the hospital at what they called the Butterfly House when I had my interview, because I had to have a sexual assault kit done because I was sexually assaulted. But when I tried to pursue this, all of that disappeared. Everything from my trial was gone. My photos could no longer be found. I called the hospital and they said that they had given them to the police department, and the police department said, oh, the hospital has them, so you just need, you just need to contact them. No one found them. No one has them. I've never seen them, but I remember them being taken. I was in the hospital for several hours. I lost my job because they thought I was lying to them. So I don't know if it's because of his trial or not, but I could not access even like the affidavit or my story or anything when I went to go look for it again. I have it all typed up from the day after, I believe. Here's another thing you might have to pause to read. So Detective Potter was the detective on the case. He told me that he went and interviewed Wade, who for the entirety of our relationship, he told me his name was Steven. He wouldn't show me his license. I found out that Steven was actually his middle name later. So Detective Potter told me that he went down to the Keys, did a DNA test, and spoke to Wade in person. And Wade told him that I was into that kind of thing, and that's why, like, I was tied up and stuff like that. I had to remind the detective that I had a busted face, that Wade had stolen my phone and sold it for crack while I was bound and gagged, tied up underneath a blanket in the back of my car. This man drove through a McDonald's while I was tied up in the back of my car, naked, bound and gagged. Literally, I had a shirt tied around my face. I had leggings in my mouth. My foot was broken because he slammed it in the door. So when I heard the trial of him doing that to Christina Melton, tying her up with her own clothes, it brought back a lot of feelings for me. I hadn't spoken out about this as much. Lots of people know, and I've obviously talked to the news, but I haven't like posted a lot about it since it happened, because Wade would find ways to contact me while he was in jail. He would use other people's accounts, or he would call from other people's numbers. And the last time I spoke to him, I believe like last year or the year before, I told him I wanted nothing to do with him. I would see him at his trial date or when they put him to death, whatever. I wanted nothing to do with him, and he promised that he would see me later. So I was a little hesitant about like telling the whole world about this, because I was afraid that he was going to get out and come after me. I actually moved over an hour away from where I lived because I was just afraid that he was going to find me and try to kill me. His girlfriend after me, her friends had reached out to me to tell me that he was abusing her. So I spoke to her. I explained to her what he did to me and warned her, but he's charismatic. He's 6'5". He's a good looking dude. Well, he was. He's not anymore. So, you know, he's a smooth talker. He persuaded her to stay, and he almost did the same thing to her. He beat the crap out of her. He, like, tied her up and threw her out naked in the parking lot. Like, it's the fact that the police department failed me so severely by not even arresting this man on a suspicion after I had gone to the hospital with injuries and sexual assault and literally a knife in my car that he had used. He had cut my OnStar so that no one could find me if I did use it. Just like after he did all of that, he met up with a girl. He met up with a girl and handed me my keys back and left. So I drove home. I drove 100 miles an hour on I-95 hoping that I would get pulled over so that I could explain what happened, but I never got pulled over. So I went straight home to Palm Beach County. So, I mean, looking back, I should have found a police officer there, but it was 4 a.m. I didn't have a phone. I was 3 hours from home. I didn't know where I was. I knew how to get home because I had been in the Keys before. But had this detective actually done his job and arrested this man, I think these women would still be alive, because I would have testified against him for this. My whole family, all my friends, everyone would have stood up for this. And this detective basically said, you were into that kind of thing, so we can't really do anything about it. So that's my story. There's a lot more detail to what he did, and I will gladly share more detail. If there's any women out there that are scared to leave, please message me. I will always talk to you. I will help you the best I can. I'm always going to try to help women or even men leave abusive relationships. Wade actually dated a man after me and stabbed him. So it happens to men too. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I will always be there to talk. But I'm going to share the video where he is found guilty. He does have a smirk on his face, and I'm hoping that for sentencing on the 20th that he gets the death penalty, and I will be there with a big sign saying bye. Anyway, thank you for listening.
At the end of all of this, investigators actually decided not to pursue these charges due to lack of evidence and a no contact order that was already in place. So we can already see that Wade was definitely involved in a really unusual amount of crime while growing up. He already ended up in jail quite a few times, and I feel like this should have been a huge red flag that there was something deeper and darker going on inside him. It genuinely does surprise me that no one really tried to get him any sort of help, and they just kind of let him continue committing the crimes that he'd been committing without assuming that he was maybe mentally ill. Yeah, I just don't understand how no one saw the signs. On the morning of October 7, 2019, two women, Christine Melton and Diane Ruse, were murdered in pretty shocking ways. Christine Moulton, who was originally from Illinois, made a new life for herself in Cape Coral in Florida, working as a waitress. She shared a duplex and was known for her close bond with her family, serving as the godmother to her cousin's child. Christine was a proud cat owner, and she was known for her love of dressing up, especially on Halloween. At just 35 years old, Christine met Wade at a bar called Buddha Live, which is in Fort Myers. After spending some time drinking and having a good time at the bar, Christine, Wade, and her friend Jason went back to her duplex. Shortly after Jason left, Wade saw his opportunity and strangled Christine to death in her sleep. Shortly after, he stole her car. Shortly after he killed Christine, Diane would cross paths with Wade. Diane Ruse was a 43-year-old mother who was engaged to be married. Described as very caring and hardworking, Diane was a dedicated bartender at the Moose Lodge in Cape Coral, and she never missed a shift in 5 years. As Diane was walking to work for her 10 a.m. shift, Wade stopped on the side of the road and asked her for some directions. He lured Diane into his car under this false pretense, and when Diane tried to leave, his violent tendencies resurfaced. He brutally beat and strangled her, pushing her out of the car and running over her repeatedly. Her body was later discovered in a field 3 days after the attack. The thing that Wade said after running over Diane was one of the most disturbing things I've ever heard a human being say. He ended up running over her multiple times until, in his words, she looked like spaghetti. After this, Wade actually immediately called his biological father and confessed to him of the crimes that he had just committed. The following day, 25-year-old Wade was arrested and charged for the murders of both women. So I just want to talk a little bit about Wade's mental state while growing up. It's believed that he had really intense psychological issues that contributed to his very violent behavior. In the legal battle surrounding Wade and his trial, crucial evidence regarding his mental health came to light. Testimony was presented about his history of brain injuries that shed light on possible factors that contributed to his very impulsive behavior. 5 years after Wade was arrested, Dr. Mark Rubino testified at his trial. The neurologist stated that some of the brain scans revealed trauma and impairment, suggesting that these injuries could definitely explain some of Wilson's actions. However, experts for the prosecution actually argued that substance abuse may have played a bigger role in his behavior at the time of the crimes. Dr. Mark Rubino also stated that Wilson's recent brain scans revealed brain trauma that included issues with short-term memory and cognitive and emotional problems linked to psychiatric disease. During the discussions between Wade and Dr. Mark Rubino, Wade revealed that he was actually doing quite well until around age 11, when he confided to his parents that he felt he was going crazy. Wade recounted 2 significant car accidents during his youth in Tallahassee. In one incident, he was a passenger in a car that hit an oak tree and his head hit the windshield. In another, he was with friends at the beach where they also crashed into a tree. It's worth it to note that he did not seek medical care after either of these incidents. And because he was never at hospital for any of these incidents, Dr. Mark Rubino was unable to obtain any medical records to back up Wilson's claims. But he did say that these incidents that Wade recounted were most likely true because of the brain injuries that were presented during the brain scan. At the end, he concluded that Wilson's behavior could definitely be explained by both his head injuries and psychiatric disease. Another testimony from neuropsychologist Dr. Hyman Eisenstein revealed that Wade had actually been diagnosed with several other mental health issues as well. This included depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and schizoaffective disorder. Dr. Eisenstein highlighted that Wade actually suffers from something called neurocognitive impairment, which means that his brain operates differently from what we would consider to be normal. But shortly after, the state brought in its own expert, Dr. Michael Herkoff, who challenged these claims. Dr. Herkoff argued that there was insufficient evidence to validate a diagnosis of any kind of psychotic disorder. Instead, he pointed to Wade's very long history of drug abuse, which was well documented and also reported by Wade himself. This substance abuse could definitely provide a more credible explanation for Wade's delusions and his pattern of criminal behavior. So when the trial focused on his mental state, it was kind of an argument between a few doctors. Some of them claimed that it was because of head injuries and brain trauma of when he was younger, and some of them claimed that it was because of his long history of substance abuse. Either way, Wade's mental state was not stable in any way. His mind was not functioning the same as a normal human being's would. And shortly after Wade committed the murders, he phoned his biological father and immediately confessed to what he had done. At his trial, Wade's father, Stephen Testeseka, I think I might be butchering that, testified against him in court. He repeated details of Wade's confession over the phone. Wade actually told him that he ran over Diane multiple times after realizing that she was not dead. And he also could not explain his motives beyond him just wanting to do it. After being incarcerated, Wade also tried to break out of Lee County Jail and was again arrested on drug-related charges in April of 2023. Even after Wade was put in jail, he was still committing crimes. Let's speak a little bit about the verdict. So on June 12th of this year, 2024, a jury in Lee County found Wade Wilson guilty of 2 murders and recommended the death penalty for both. Just a couple of months later, on August 27th of 2024, Judge Nicholas Thompson officially sentenced him to death for each crime. During the sentencing, Judge Thomas stated that the evidence showed both crimes were heinous, atrocious, and cruel. He also emphasized that the second murder was particularly cold, calculated, and definitely planned. Now, during the trial, the jury had the decision to either recommend life in prison without parole or the death penalty. And interestingly, in Florida, juries don't have to be unanimous to actually recommend the death penalty. When it came to Christine Melton's case, the jury voted 9-3 in favor of the death penalty, and for Diane Ruse's case, it was even stronger with a 10-2 vote for the death penalty.
First-degree murder. Accordingly, it is ordered and adjudged that the defendant, Wade Stephen Wilson, be sentenced as follows. Count 1, first-degree murder of Christine Melton. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 2, grand theft of a motor vehicle. The defendant is sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 3, battery. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in the Lee County Jail. Count 4, first-degree murder of Diane Ruiz. The defendant is hereby sentenced to death. Count 5, the burglary of a dwelling. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 15 years imprisonment in the Florida Department of Corrections. Count 6, petty theft. The defendant is hereby sentenced to 364 days in Lee County Jail. The defendant is given credit for all time served on this case on all counts. All counts are to run concurrent with each other, meaning at the same time. All statutorily mandated fines, fees, and costs as announced on the record are imposed, and the defendant is committed to the custody of the Department of Corrections for execution of this sentence as provided by law.
I personally think because of how brutally both of these innocent women were murdered, for no real reason other than he felt like he wanted to do it, he deserves the verdict he got. I just wish that he had in some way been made aware of his brain damage and mental illness early in his life, just for him to be given an opportunity to help himself. Lastly, I just want to speak about some of the social media attention that Wade got. One thing that really got to me about this case was the really disturbing amount of social media attention he got. And not because of how brutally he murdered these women and how disgustingly disturbing his mind is. People were fangirling over this guy and admiring this guy for his looks, and he's actually gained a bit of a following, mostly from women who are asking the judge to spare his life. Since Wade has been in prison, he's been receiving a ton of messages and letters from women, about 4,000 to be exact. A lot of these are from women who are really misguided, some even sending him inappropriate photos of themselves. Prison officials had to reject over 160 photos because they were way too explicit. These women and other supporters have also been writing to the judge in charge of his case, asking him to not give Wilson the death penalty. This is despite the fact that the jury had already decided Wilson should get the death penalty. But all of these letters that these women are sending are unlikely to change his future. According to judicial rules, the judge can't consider letters like these that are sent outside of the court process. This idea of romanticizing serial killers has definitely come up in the past. It's not new. We have seen it before. And now it has happened with Wade as well. I think it's really wrong and pretty disrespectful towards the victims' families when random people going around making thirst traps of Wade. This is also largely why the case went so viral. It's because women are so attracted to this guy. That's just my opinion though. I think he's disgusting. But if you have anything that you'd like to share about this case, please don't hesitate to comment down below. I would love to hear your opinions on this. And I'd love to hear your opinion on the social media attention that this guy has gotten. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe if you like this kind of content. Please let me know down in the comments if there's a case that you'd like me to cover, and I will see you guys again next week. Bye!